Welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast. I am Jeff Hillemeyer, and with my friend Alex Gonzalez, we explore topics that help you be your best self. And we also get to chat with some great guests. So join us now on the Jeff and Alex podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast. I'm here with Jeff Hillemeyer once again. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm excited for this one.
This is really good, and we're going to be bringing Kate Atwood here into the very massive multi-million-dollar Jeff and Alex podcast studio. So I'm excited about that. So, Jeff, how did you get to know Kate? Because you know so many people here, particularly in our hometown here of Atlanta. But how did you get to know her?
You know, I can't remember exactly how we first got connected. It might have been someone like Ann Kramer. Probably so, or Ken Bernhardt, but I've known her for a long time, and she's connected me to people, as I know she has to you, but I've just always loved following her journey and her spirit and her energy. And so she's been, one of those Atlanta inspirations for me. How about you?
Yeah, no, I crossed paths with her at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and probably even a little bit before that as well too. But it's, I got to know her during the kind of growth and the building of this ChooseATL brand, which is kind of this, brand really targeting, younger talent, and got to know her as this kind of curator, right? So there's this element of her being kind of a community builder, but also there's this incredible creative edge that you and I talked a little bit about kind of that creative
That's
force.
Right.
I see her in that kind of curator disruptor category, especially curator and her ability to bring, I remember being in Austin, Texas at a South by Southwest event that ChooseATL was having, and having everybody from a major political figure to a CEO of a company to Ludacris, in the same room at the same place. It all made sense. So that's kind of my perspective as meeting Kate as being an incredible curator. So we're going to bring her on board, have a great conversation. So let's roll it here with Kate Atwood. All right, Kate Atwood, how are you doing? Welcome to the Jeff and Alex podcast.
I'm so good. Even better now that I'm connecting with you guys. This is so exciting.
It's great to see. It is funny as we do this, and just in general with Zoom calls, but especially during this podcast, when we see somebody and it's almost like the excitement level goes up. It's like human interaction, even though it's still through video, and then you wish that you could be around a table, but the time will come. It's great to see you.
I know. Yeah. And, for me, it's been interesting because I intentionally took some time to kind of, after I left my last position at the Chamber of Commerce with you, Alex, I took some time to kind of go back in my shell and be quiet. And I was just about ready to come back out. And then it was like, nope, you're going back in.
Yeah, it's like, there you go.
So I feel like I haven't seen a lot of people for a long time.
It's kind of crazy.
But yeah, it is crazy.
So I obviously we've been friends for a long time, and I've been excited to have you on this. I was thinking about, I don't even know how to describe what you do, because I feel like there's 10 directions I could go. Like, oh yeah, Kate, she's founder of this thing or leader in this area. So how do you describe when someone says, what do you do? The classic question.
Yeah, well, and I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about that, because I do think that my career path has been very non-traditional. Sometimes I describe it as, I did it backwards. So I started with my legacy piece, which I think, like anything, has its, its pros and its cons. And I say that because, to start with your legacy piece, to start with you start your career with something that was so personal, as I did with Kate's Club. Kate's Club, for people who don't know, is a nonprofit organization that serves and empowers youth who are bereaved. So kids around the Metro Atlanta area who have lost a parent or a sibling come to Kate's Club for support and community and fellowship. And I started that, I think 18 years ago. We're about to be 18 years old, which I know I look 18. So no, I was not 5, just kidding. But but I was 22, I was 23. And, back then, starting a nonprofit was not like it is today, right? There was kind of the United Way, the Girls Club. There was the established nonprofits existed, but there wasn't crowdfunding. There wasn't this movement quite yet. It happened a little bit after that. So it was a little bit odd for a 22, 23-year-old to be starting a nonprofit organization. And I can share a little bit more about why that happened and how that happened. But for me, coming out of that was the moment that I had to ask, like, what do I want to do? Because I knew I didn't want to do bereavement for my entire career. That was a very personal decision and mission. And I knew I now had the opportunity to witness my legacy for the duration, of my career, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But I did have to wrestle a lot with, like, what am I good at? What do I like to do? What's my purpose? Even after Kate's Club. But where I sit with you guys today is to say, I think with conviction, that the through line is a community builder. The through line is that I have to have a mission that is has the North Star of belonging, bringing people together and connection. And that's very, that's grand. There's, I think that I'm not alone in that. I think my vehicles have been very curious and, I've been in every sector. I kind of say now I've been in the nonprofit sector. I did the Arby's Foundation and was in what you could call the private sector. And then I, of course, did ChooseATL at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and that was the civic sector. So it makes sense to me, and it's been wildly fun, but it's been very non-traditional.
Yeah. I mean, part of it's almost like you're, thinking about kind of the media and celebrity world being a multi-hyphenate, right? It's like, producer, I'm an actor, you're kind of involved in all these different aspects of it. Do you get, which by the way, I can kind of connect with, but do you get impatient in role? Do you find a time in certain roles that you've said, hey, I think I fulfilled my purpose, and so now I need to find another platform? What do you think of where you are in that moment and when it's right for you?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been able to realize, in terms of if I, outgrow or when I decide to kind of move on from a project, is that I've had now the experience to learn that I know the time and the stage of a company or an initiative that I'm best at, that I'm most efficient, I'm most effective as a leader, as a producer. I think the interesting thing about me is I love vision casting and I love being a leader, but I also love doing the work. And the years 0 to 5 is when you get to do that. And some people may say that's crazy, and I do, I work really hard, but I have such a passion for every project that I do that it's very important for me to be able to do both. And of course that means build a team and find, the chemistry of that team. And I love that work. It's all, again, it's the through line of belonging. But I think in every case that I've built something, I have instinctually known when maybe the management gets a little bit more than the ability to do the work, or the strategy I'm kind of getting, I'm like wanting to go at this pace, and, there's more people than I can, really do the work at that pace. And then it's not about me. Right. So that all comes into the mix in how I decide, what to do and how long to do it. But I've been so fortunate. I mean, I've had some of the most exciting, awesome things. I mean, that is just like, that's the universe. That's just bigger than me. But every single project I've had has been so different, and a new challenge, which brings a new curiosity. And I probably say it wasn't until ChooseATL that I really was able to say, oh yeah, I kind of do some things the same. Like right. There is a rhythm here. There is a method to the madness, if you will. But that's what I would say. It's about the early years for me, and I love building in those early years.
And just jump in real quick, sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
Because I think that is such an important kind of perspective to have on self. And I always talk to, and we spend a lot of time talking to change leaders all the time, whether it's entrepreneurial change leaders, that when's the right time to let someone else run the company, or I think in corporate a lot, where when do you know it's time that it's okay to take those skill sets to something else and new and change and drive impact and be fresh? And then I think as leaders, how do you hire people at the right times to do that thing? So I think your perspective will be great advice for some folks in their career in terms of when to know and how do I fit in that kind of change journey.
Yeah. And I think our instinct is stronger than we allow it to be, especially in our work life. And I get it, I mean, there is security, there's things that make it dynamic, but I have always been really grateful for my instinct. And I think that is part of my resilience from my childhood. But I think, and I understand the challenges of making career decisions around instinct when you have dependents and you have other dynamics that, may make it a little bit scary or you don't have the opportunity to take as much risk. But I do always encourage people to, especially if you're early in your career when you can take more risk, like really get to know that instinct, like get to know when you're spending more time at the job trying to like the job than and trying to make it fit for you, work for you, than really being honest and saying, maybe my mission's complete here, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, being a part of something and then knowing that your contribution to that, your value to that, has been completed. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Now I'm curious about the vehicles. You mentioned that, there's a through line of community and belonging, but the vehicles change. It does seem like you may be coalescing around a couple of different vehicles or platforms or foundations for that. Can you talk about that and maybe what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I have been let me just take a step back, because I have become fascinated by Maslow's hierarchy. So, my desire to leave the world a better place, really comes from both a perspective of things that we can control and improve. And then in my case, things that happen in your life that you have no control over. So if a big part of my story, that when I had, lost when I was very young, I lost my mother at the age of 12, which I now know is one of the most critical developmental ages for young girls. And then to have maternal loss at that time, there were a lot of odds stacked against me. Even though I had a roof over my head, I was able to go to school. So that sense of belonging, I became fascinated by it very early on. And I was really a student of it, I think, before I realized I was. And what I've come to learn about the, American society as it relates to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you guys familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's like the most revered kind of psychological hierarchy. And let me just geek out on this for a second, and then I'll get back to the question. But, there is a middle tier. So the first layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is just our physical needs: water, food, shelter. The second tier is our physiological needs. So security of a job, security of housing, security of healthcare. And then that middle one, which is where it really starts to get into psychological needs, is love amongst others. And why I'm so fascinated by that middle tier, and you can't even have a chance to get to unlock the next level of needs until that level is met, right? So, if you're lucky to get to that that psychological level of love amongst others, that's only when you can entertain and obtain self-esteem. And then, of course, above self-esteem is self-actualization. But we have so many conversations in our society and our culture about self-esteem and self-actualization, ignoring that belonging has to be met first. That you truly can't have self-esteem if you don't have the foundation of love amongst others. And our families have gotten smaller, our faith institutions have kind of become smaller, if not dissipated fully. We're in this digital era where anybody can be you can be connected to anybody. And it's always been interesting to me that, as and I will say, I think it's probably Western cultures, but I'll speak as Americans, that we have given such little regard to that love amongst others. We almost kind of like try to Jenga board it, right? And say, let's just move it out of the way. Let's have self-help, $60 billion industry. Let's talk about purpose and self-actualization and finding your way. But we've forgotten that you have to do that first in relationship with others. And I had a moment when I learned that, when that smacked me in my face when I was 19 years old, and I went to volunteer at a camp, and I stood up and I shared my story of losing my mom for the first time. And the transaction that happened to me in that moment at 19 years old, when I was speaking to 200 other kids who had lost a parent, was I thought I was going up there just to tell my story for me, but I understood the power of it in relationship with others. I understood that when a young girl came up to me and said, "You're Kate, I lost my mom and my dad," and she shared her story, I was like, that's it. That transaction right there is what life is all about. So across all these vehicles, I've wanted to bring people together who may not have understood that transaction, who may have been sitting across from somebody or doing work with somebody, or had, a community need down the street around the corner and they had no idea. And of course I did that with Kate's Club. That was first, right? So I took my personal experience of not belonging in my grief, and I made an organization where you belonged, without a doubt. Every child should have support. No child should ever grieve alone. And they should have that support amongst peers. At the Arby's Foundation, it was really two things, internal and external. And I always try to kind of look at both. Internally, it was, of course, I was under the incredible leadership of Hala Madomag, who was turning around the entire brand. Right. And she gave me the career opportunity of a lifetime. Really, this definitely changed the trajectory for me. She said, she asked if we could come and relaunch the foundation. Now, little backstory, the Arby's Foundation wasn't a typical corporate foundation where there was money allocated from the brand and you gave that money away, right? It was a self-sustaining nonprofit organization. I had to look at all stakeholder categories and raise money. And then with that money, we could give it away. So obviously the biggest stakeholder was the franchisee. So I had to get the franchisee to like each other, first of all, to like the brand, and then to care about something that they just totally didn't even think existed. And I'm being honest. We had this strategy, and this was done, of course, by consulting work. I was able to walk in with a strategy around ending childhood hunger. And at the time, childhood hunger was losing all noise to childhood obesity. Nobody thought, how could childhood hunger in America exist? Now we're much more enlightened about it. So I had to get these franchisees to care about and to really believe that there were kids right in their neighborhood who weren't getting enough to eat. And I did that by making them come face to face with those kids and to have experience with those kids and to have that transaction happen where they could say, oh, this is what this is about, and then also doing that with the customer, and doing that in a way with the customer, it was a little bit harder because you couldn't bring the customer to the front line, but you relied on the storyteller, the franchisee, and the employees to be able to tell that story. Of course, other marketing tactics. But you also wanted this, I was very intentional about it, not just, it was about the cause, but it was also about this community of a brand that, of course, Hala was really the driver of this, but I like to think we were really a supplemental force and it brought people closer to what we were doing as a business, right? And it brought that element, that rally cry of like, yes, we can, we can do this together. We can have a collective impact. And suddenly Arby's was positioned to be a leader in the category of childhood hunger at the same time that childhood hunger was starting to really get traction as a very critical crisis that was happening in our country. So that was a really proud moment. Everything I do, when I say the vehicle, it's because I use the word vehicle because it's like, I'm not in it alone. Like part of it, the journey is getting people in there with me. Right. And then I would say, and then to, go from that to having Atlanta, and getting this opportunity to build something for this place that has given me so much and what did allow me to be somebody when I was 23 years old. It was the same sentiment. ChooseATL, of course, was a platform that, had was set up, and I was asked to come in and help, get it off the ground and launch it. So there was already some stickiness and some foundation. But what I'm proud about with ChooseATL is, again, it wasn't about me, and coming up with a slogan and, trying to say, okay, Atlantans, this is going to be our slogan, you lose that way. It was about bringing people along with it and saying, if we're going to be able to market and attract millennial and workforce talent to Atlanta, it's going to come from the people that have already made the decision to call Atlanta home. Right. And that was, kind of the fundamental vehicle there was like, have that transaction with somebody who already is calling this place home. It's already impacting. Of course, that looked a ton of different ways, and it's more dynamic than that. But I would say it all comes down to the transaction of belonging and how powerful that is. And clearly can matter in every sector of business, is what I like to believe.
It seems like with ChooseATL also, you started to lean more into video, digital storytelling, OTT. And so it does seem like that's also an area you're exploring.
Moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good lead into kind of what's next. So at ChooseATL, the team and I launched Thea, which was in essence really the first city-based streaming platform. Right. So streaming was exploding. Everybody kind of knew this was, when everybody was starting to know about Netflix, but, we didn't really know what OTT was and streaming was. And because at the Chamber, one of the most beautiful things about the Chamber, and Alex, I know you know this, is you just you have the most fascinating conversations. There is no way to comprehend all of the cool stuff that's going on out in a metro area. But when you're at ground zero, when you're at the Chamber of Commerce. And part of I'll be honest, part of my objective being there was really to get a lay of the land. I knew I wanted to move over to and launch. The thing that I still have to do is launch a for-profit venture. That's the only thing I got left. Like I said, I'm doing my career backwards. So I went with an eye on, this is going to give me the light bulb, the idea for, my private, venture. And so launching Thea, I was this, streaming platform in which we were aggregating and sourcing content, Disruptor Studio. We had, great docuseries. We had short films. We had music videos. It was all about enabling the content creators around Atlanta to be the storytellers, right? Simple interface. But the original idea was that it would give me almost controls in a marketing tool, innovative marketing tool, to then push this content out to the West Coast and to the Northeast, know about our tech, know about our lifestyle and culture. Here's the interesting thing that happened. When we were doing focus groups with the colleges and university students around Atlanta, as we were getting feedback about the site and, how should we, push this out? They all kept coming back and saying, wait, we want this for us.
Right.
They wanted that, again, I'll go back to the word transaction. They wanted that transaction to be able to feel more connected to the place that they were already calling home. And so Thea was born out of an idea of innovation for marketing and to get Atlanta's story out. I mean, how many times have we heard that? How are we going to tell our story? How are we going to tell our story? But it ended up for me being the genesis of a new passion point, which is we really have lost the value proposition of proximity when it comes to the consumption of our content. And that, quite honestly, is impacting our communities economically, civically, socially, and it's impacting our quality of life as citizens of that community. And I have, in the time that probably we have last talked, gotten very, very focused and passionate about that. And I think the past 6 months, I've been trying to, even with Thea, I was pushing this, I felt like I was pushing this boulder up this hill. I was passionate about media. Media and storytelling is the vehicle. It is the pinnacle. When I talk about vehicles, it's the pinnacle of impact. Right. So I do feel like it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of meaningful that I would go after media next, right? Because I haven't done it yet. And media is fascinating in its good things and its bad things. But if I could influence media for good, and by media, I don't mean just journalism. I mean the mechanics of the distribution of content and delivery of content. If I could impact that in the way that I've impacted these other vehicles, that would be like a really cool moment.
Media right now is in the midst of massive innovation, transformation, and inflection. I know from the time when we got to know each other, we had many discussions about the one is what is it going to be, but that was almost the exciting part of you engaging this. It's like how can we help shape it, because it is just there to be shaped. So it sounds like that's really the big step you're taking now.
And I've had my head down this summer, but I felt like this was serendipitous in a way, because I both of you guys, I literally have a short list that I need to connect with you guys. So this will go beyond the podcast. But when COVID hit, and I think to just thread this story, I wanted to leave the chamber. I wanted to figure out what I was going to build next. The chamber, moved Thea out. So with that partnership, so a little story here. I thought that would be my path. That partnership did not work out, and it was a decision that I made at the top of the year that I wanted to honor the original commitment to myself that I made when I decided to leave the chamber, and that was it's very important for me to, whatever I build next, have ownership and have creative control. And our visions, with Aru and me, the vision was just different, right? And that happens all the time. So in transparency and in the honesty of the journey, in February was like, maybe this isn't it, like maybe I've tried, I've been really passionate about it, but maybe it's not it. And I was kind of grieving that chapter, finally really kind of grieving the ChooseATL chapter. And then I couldn't put my head down at night without thinking, we are, if not, me, who? And if not now, when? And then COVID hit. And I was like, this is why we need local. I mean, it's so quickly, unfortunately, exasperated, but also made clear the absence of local, right? The absence of local when it comes to communication and information, the absence of local when it comes to, affinity and connection to retail and consumerism. And by golly, can you imagine if we had local fleshed out, if we had figured it out, how many restaurants could have popped up content and had a lifeline to revenue, how many entertainers, artists, it would have, the ability to have proximity when it comes to content consumption would have not only allowed for there to be some economic viability, but it also would have made us feel more connected and I quite honestly, I think safer. And so in early March, I said, okay, well, no time better than now to rebuild.
Right.
So I've been 6 months in. I have 2 incredible co-founders, and we have a new platform. It hasn't launched yet. I don't know how much you want me to talk about it. We've got, we're fundraising. We've got a long way to go, but I it's going to happen. And I think people, let me just say the pitch is a lot easier today than it was even a year ago,
Why is that?
Because I think it's 2 things. I think COVID has, one, our footprint's smaller, right? I mean, our footprint shrank overnight. And I think people now also realize that it's not going to open up. We're going to start being able to move around, but travel's going to be regional. We're going to, are we going to trust the when it does open up? It's going to be a slow unfold. It's consumer trust and safety, right? Like that's going to have to be a whole strategy. And honestly, I think a local medium would almost help that, right? It would help get that communication out. I also think people are very concerned about the younger generations and the trends that we are now seeing as the first generations to just grow up with social media. The millennials are the first generation not to have local media or local content medium that worked for every other generation. Broadcast TV, radio, newspaper has had that delivery form that's worked for them. And the millennials have just had social media. And I think the intent with social media was that it would be that, but I think now we know it's not that, right? It's not real connection. And so one, those college and university students, I can see them in the room, I can hear them in my ear. We've said local's dead, local's dead. Local is not dead. It just has not evolved. It has not been reinvented to be a medium that works for this digital native generation, that says, we know you're on the screen more than any other generation, that knows that we can meet you on the screen. We're not meeting you on the front porch with the newspaper. We're not meeting you in your car with your radio. And we're not meeting you at a time when we decide we want to broadcast the news, right? We got to be on demand. We got to meet you where you're at when you want it, right? And so the platform is called LoCo Plus, so Local Content Plus, will be that. It will be the first video streaming platform that carries localized content. And I think that it is something that the millennials, I know that it's something that they want, because I have the focus groups, and we're doing even more of those. But it's also needed. It is so needed. I cannot emphasize enough. We're seeing trends. I mean, I'm not even just talking about like the divisiveness or the depression or the anxiety, right? Those are the dire outcomes. I'm talking about these nuanced outcomes that, younger generations they're getting their driver's license less, they're dating less, they're getting in romantic relationships less, they're less likely to take risk. I mean, these may seem like very kind of, nuanced icing on the cake things, but you have to watch those trends, because those are clearly equivocal to their ability to connect and to have real connection. And so we talk a lot about, the team just talks a lot about our journey is going to be from screen back to real life, right? So you're going to be watch game of, the Dogwood Festival and say, oh gosh, you know what? Like, I want to go check that out, and then literally be down there. Or you're going to be able to watch, a cooking show with, a chef, and then be able to make the reservation because you want to go try that restaurant out on Friday. That's what we're trying to nail. Which no other streaming platform, or quite honestly, social media platform, can do that in such a concentrated and valuable way.
Yeah, and I think also you're talking about people are, they're talking about safety, or they're cooped up or whatever. I believe there's going to be this incredible experiential demand on the other side, whatever the other side of this is or looks like, or the timeline. That's a whole different discussion. But I think there's a pent up demand to connect, to experience. So it's interesting when you're talking about is to have a local, if you have that content that's local, it really gives you even much more. I think that could give you more of an entry point, or be part of the holistic aspect of experiencing. I think you brought up some great examples of how that can occur.
And I also like to point out that local is no longer restricted, right? So you can build, and this is what my time at the chamber got me so passionate about this, that the U.S. regions are being so more acutely defined by identity. And that's so wonderfully exciting, right? It's no longer coastal or non-coastal. It's like we have these regions that have unique lifestyle and culture, that have unique outdoor and, business ecosystems, and they're all a little bit different. And so by local, yes, that is a programming, kind of editorial strategy, but it no longer means that you can't be curious about a local place that's somewhere else, right? So content, content can be consumed across this region, and that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to, build the most interconnected catalog of independent content, and quite honestly, unseat YouTube in this era of distribution. And we won't, I'll just say this, because we see ourselves as having two customers, and we won't do that necessarily by our customers who are users. We will do that by our customers who are content creators. Because if we enter the market and we have better monetization and we have a better funnel of discoverability, then those content creators on YouTube will move over to LoCo Plus. That is the goal. So we are creating market value, because quite honestly, you have, the US local advertising market is $161 billion market. 60% of that is still going to traditional media. Those guys are on borrowed days.
Right.
So we will create new value, because we will revitalize local, but then we'll take some market share, because we'll take some of that from YouTube, because we will be the destination that independent content creators want to be on. That's where we're going. That's where we're driving the puck.
Kate, you and I have had lots of conversations over the years about things you've been working on, things we've both been working on, new things. I don't know that I've ever heard you be as passionate about something as we hear you being about LoCo Plus. So really appreciate you sharing that with us. What's the best way for people to stay up to date after they hear this, and I got to know the latest on what's going on?
Yeah. So we're building, and I think we do have GoLoCoPlus.com is actually probably the best destination. And then you can sign up. You can sign up as a user who wants, breaking information about the platform. You can sign up as a content creator who is interested in getting on the platform, or you can sign up as a brand or an advertiser who would want more information about becoming a partner. One of the things I'm really excited about is, let's say you guys put this podcast, or Disruptor Studio, That's the other thing, Alex.
Yeah.
But let's say you
We're
guys,
getting pitched, Jeff. We're getting pitched.
Yeah, you're getting
the
pitched.
Followers of ours is finally,
yeah.
reaching out.
So the way our platform for work, just let me, if I could just take a minute to talk about the content creator angle of it. So we are going to, the big power shift that's happening in content is the ownership of IP. My new co-founder, Megan Matusek, you guys don't know her because she's somebody who I brought in from LA, but she worked at Lucasfilms under George Lucas for almost a decade. She's young. She's so incredibly brilliant, but she learned from the genius of IP ownership. And we are, and she's chief creative officer because she knows how to build that side of the business in which the content creator can continue to own their IP, right? So when a filmmaker or somebody sells a show or a film to a studio or now to Netflix, they lose complete control of that project creatively. That is absurd to me. So we allow a content creator to come in, own the IP, we license that IP, that block of content. So you're getting paid up front, not much, we don't have Netflix type dollars, but you're getting a little bit of monetization up front for us to be able to license that content. And then you have back-end incentives. So even if you have stuff on YouTube, you're going to be incentivized to drive it to LoCo Plus. You own the IP the whole time. Let's say your show blows up, you suddenly want to put some hats on Etsy or some, merchandise out there. Right. You own the IP, you drive that journey. If you were to go to Disney, Netflix, and strike a deal with them, they get to do all that. Right. One of the content creators we become close with are the creators of Rugrats and Recess, the most successful animated franchise that's existed. These creators, I think they made the merchandise made Nickelodeon made $1 billion in the first year of merchandise for Rugrats. Do you know how much these guys saw of it?
I don't even want to know.
Zero. Wow. Zero, because they didn't own their IP. That's the power shift that's going to happen. We're going to try to get ahead of that with our content creators. And then we're also going to be the funnel of discoverability to the top of the market. That's the other goal we're going for. So we want the best of the best. Like I said, I could sit and talk to you guys for 3 hours. I know we have a limited amount of time, but I really do want to talk to both of you guys after this.
Yeah, no, listen, and I think
Alex, we would geek out on this stuff so much.
I was just about to say that. We could. This is like.
And Jeff, I know how your mind works around, community, and I'm trying to figure out the right way. I don't want to say customers, but users, I think how this is going to be curated, how we do this with intention, but also knowing that when we master this in Atlanta, this is where I'm really going to need y'all's help. When we master this in Atlanta, the big dogs are really going to be they're going to come alive after it, because nobody's been able to solve this problem. Yeah. Nobody has been able to solve this problem. So the adventure is beginning, but Jeff, you're right. I am the most passionate because I think it's the most courageous, biggest thing that I've decided to take on, and that will bring great feelings that are good or bad, but sign me up.
And probably the full spectrum of them along the journey too. But you're right, Kate. I think this is something we will definitely looking forward to catching up. We'll definitely geek out on this kind of future of content, which have been how to shape it. So, and I'm sure we'll have many conversations on the show here in terms of if this keeps going on. But and listen, I love it when you're over here talking about Lucasfilms and YouTube, and we're taking them on. That's how you get stuff moving and reshaping, because you got to start with that too. But I do want to thank you for joining us, Jeff and I, here on the Jeff and Alex podcast. and look forward to catching
I
up.
love it. I'm so glad you guys are doing this.
Yeah, it was super fun to have you. This was.
I know you are
great.
two of my favorite humans. And yeah. And I'm so glad you're doing it because I mean, it's only the first inning of this content disruption. I think a lot of people think it's like the 6th or 7th. It is only the first inning. So I'm just glad you guys just dove in and started to build something.
That's what you got to do is dive in and start talking because we're going to do it anyway. So we figured we might as well film it. So
yeah, exactly.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Kate.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, Jeff. So what energy does Kate Atwood always? Actually, she always brings that energy, but she's pretty excited about this new project.
That seemed like a different level of energy that I've seen from her, and yeah, she's always positive and passionate. But that was exciting. I didn't know that's exactly where she was headed. I'm in.
I mean, it makes total sense to me because I know something as, it's funny because so many people know her through Kate's Club and what she's done with the community, which is incredible. We probably could have gone so much more into that as well, too. But, I kind of got to know her during this element of her really understanding media and so forth. So it makes sense, but it's definitely great to see that. And it's going to be, and look, this is the time to kind of disrupt media because it's really being shaped. So it's pretty exciting. So we'll see.
Yep.
It looks like we kind of partially got pitched too.
we did. Well, yeah, I was in, so I'll help any way I can.
Well, good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of the Jeff and Alex podcast. Make sure you follow both Jeff Hillamar and I on social media. Continue the conversation there, and also make sure you subscribe on YouTube, or also subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or do both because, I'm sure the experience is totally different when you listen to us and when you see us, and you could tell us in person which one you prefer better. But so we'll see you again in about a week. Good seeing you again, Jeff.
Yeah, good seeing you. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, everybody.